Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wayne Public Library's virtual jazz series. And today I have the very great pleasure of talking and chatting with jazz pianist, educator, composer, etc., Oscar Perez. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Patty.
I'm going to do my very best today not to try to fangirl on you because I am a huge fan and I've seen you perform many, many different places and times in different combos. And that's something I do want to talk to you about. We had the great pleasure of first meeting at Laurelwood Arboretum when the library coordinated and he played with Abram Morales and Latinx.
I
And that
remember that.
was back in August of 2022. So that's when we first met.
Okay.
Not long after that, interestingly enough, the basis for that was Marcos Varela, who's playing here in April. So
Right.
I next met you with Big Funk, Carl Latham's and Don
Hmm.
Braden's band in Ramsey in 2022. Then you performed with a quartet of the Dream Team, as I'll call it, at the library in Ramsey in also 2022. You then performed at Brush Culture in Teaneck with your brother in a trio,
Yep.
and that was in 23. You performed here at the library, and that recording is also on the Wayne Public Library's YouTube page. I'll put that information for the viewers to follow up with at the end. Then you were at the Morris Museum last year in a totally different combo where you were performing a Jazz Goes to the Movies. So let's just jump into what my initial question is here. So you were performing in ensembles, in duos, in trios. You performed a duo with Nathan Eklund. You have all these different combos. What is your preference? Do you have a preference? And how do you go about choosing what you want to do?
Well, honestly, to me, it's all about collaborations. Look, like when I have the opportunity to play with somebody who I really admire, or somebody I haven't played with before, or somebody whom I know I have great musical chemistry with, I will always favor that over anything else. Uh, like I don't care about, really what it pays if it's something that's really good, or where the gig is, or if I have to play a keyboard or not. I mean, of course, these are all factors that you think about when you get the initial call. But I know that if any of the people that you mentioned call me, I'm playing the gig if I'm available, you know. And along with that list is like, other people like Steve Teray and Mike Lee and Eddie Allen. And I'm probably leaving off of Juan Galacunza. Like all these people that call me, I really enjoy playing with them because they're great musicians. They're a great hang. I know that there will be no funny business on the gig in terms of like, any of the logistics. So for me, it now that I'm a little older, I don't really have to qualify the gigs, right? It used to be, there's this old adage that there are three reasons why you take a gig, either the music, the hang, and the money. So if you have two of those three things, take the gig, right? But now it seems like the only thing I really care about is the music and the hang. You know what I mean? If there are people that I enjoy being with. So for me, that's really it. I'm blessed to have been able to survive in this music and to continue to play music that's inspiring to me. Ted Chubb is another one. He's an old friend whose music is great. We're getting ready to make his record, second record we've done with him. And these are people that if they call, I'm just like, okay, just give me a time and a place. That's it. So for me, I'm blessed in that way.
It was a great pleasure when I first saw you at the Ramsey Public Libraries with Ted Chubb on
Yeah.
trumpet, Alvester Garnett on drums, and Chris Berger on bass. And that's where I remember walking up and be like, "I want all four of you at the Wayne Public Library. I want this. This is the perfect quartet." And what I love about it, and when you performed here, unfortunately, Alvester was not available, but he will be available when you perform on March 23rd at Our Lady of Consolation concert with Don Braden Ensemble. What was wonderful to have Tim Horner there too. I love that quartet because I feel like I'm almost like a voyeur. I'm watching four friends, four musicians who are there for the hang, as you say, and for the music, doing something really special, communicating tacitly with one another. And we, as an audience member, are just blessed to like watch that. And it's just so special. And I just am excited by that formation. So and you led both those quartets.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think when you have a really strong and personable drummer, somebody whose personality comes out, like a Tim Horner, like an Avesta Garnett, Jerome Jennings, Steve Johns. You start there. That's your building block, you know. And so for me, that's always my first call. Who's going to play drums, you know? And so when I'm lucky enough to get somebody of that ilk, I am beyond blessed because I know that the music is it's just going to happen. You know, they're super creative, and I tend to put people in those situations when I play. I don't do a lot of rehearsing because time doesn't really allow it. So I always try to get musicians that I know can make things happen on the spot. And it's always fun for us, and that translates to the audience many, many times.
So along the lines of what you're saying and choosing your the band members you would like to perform with, I found an interview where you said in picking the members of the band, they needed to have their own sound, and you were referring to Jerome Jennings. So
Mm.
when you're choosing your band, and you said that you go to drummers first, do you have in mind then a sound that you'd like for that concert, and then go to your figure out which drummer you'd like?
Sure, yeah, but one of the things that I like about the drummers that I tend to use is they can do basically anything, and that's what I like about them because I have like musical schizophrenia. Like I will put all kinds of things together and make a fusion of many different things, specifically Latin jazz, straight ahead jazz, all these kind of things, and so these drummers that I've mentioned, and many that I'm probably leaving off the list because I'm just not really thinking about that more so than the topic, is that they can handle all those things and they're going to bring their personality to it. And so I also find that with these drummers and really all the musicians, but if we're talking about drummers, they have checked out other kinds of music, not just straight ahead swing. And so their swing is strong because it has either a funk influence, a Afro-Cuban influence. You know what I mean? And so you hear it in their playing. It's multidimensional. So
That's exciting. I find it amazing as I prepared for today that you didn't discover jazz until you were at North Florida University.
yeah,
So you were basically classically trained. You went to the LaGuardia High School, the Fame High School,
right.
and yeah, I just find it. And you were actually focused on guitar, and
Yeah.
they told you that there are too many guitars, so to choose something
Yeah.
else. Like that's just
They,
amazing to me.
Yeah, it's funny. I've never considered myself a multi-instrumentalist. I'm not like one of those people who can pick up a bunch of instruments to just play, and that's not me. But what happened is I was rebellious, like most teenagers are. So while I was playing piano from the age of like 7, and then when I got to high school, I played piano um in high school, but at most high schools you don't like major in piano because you can't have a piano ensemble. So at a school like LaGuardia and many magnet schools, they'll say, well, you have to choose some kind of like orchestral or wind symphony kind of instrument. And so I chose the violin, and secretly I was listening to all kinds of rock music and pop music. And so I said, I want to play guitar, but it wasn't because I wanted to be Joe Pass. I wanted to be like Eddie Van Halen or somebody. And it was really me rebelling against my upbringing of my classical music upbringing. And so when I discovered jazz, um, or actually I had a teacher, Mr. Tony Romano, who's a great guitarist. He's on the scene. He's doing the thing. He was like, kid, if you want to play rock music well, you really need to start learning some jazz. That's where all the information is. And and so that's when I started learning Joe Pass solos and Barney Kessel solos and Jim Hall solos. And then when I got to college, I realized like, wow, I could transfer most of this information to piano because I have those chops. And so even though I had a little bit of uh, identity crisis in terms of my instrument when I got to college, they made it very clear that we have way less piano players than we have guitar players. So if you play piano, you'll be automatically put in a big band and in a small group, blah, blah, blah. And I was sold because I had stopped kind of listening to like pop music by then. And I was really focused on jazz. I was like, oh, I can make a go of this. And that's basically what happened. And I don't play guitar anymore. I can't even play like I can hardly strum chords. So, I have one. I use it sometimes to compose, but other than that, I don't ever take anybody's money to do anything other than play piano. So I know my place.
So you, when you were in high school, though, you basically knew that you were going to pursue a career as a musician.
100%. Yeah, there was nothing else I wanted to do. There was a time there where because I was so argumentative with my parents, they said you should go to law school. But other than that, it was always music. I played baseball when I was coming up, but I was definitely not gifted enough to make a go of that. And so I realized that yeah, I was just always known as the kid who played the piano. So I knew I was going to go into it. And to be honest with you, I didn't really take it seriously until I got to high school. Had I not been accepted to LaGuardia High School, I probably wouldn't have thought about it much past that. But when I got there, I was inspired. I was going to school with people like Michael Lenhart and Danny Friedman, and all these guys were doing it. And I was like in awe of them. And I was like, oh my God, I need to do this. And so, I figured out my way. Funny story. My teacher then, because I wasn't good enough to be in the big band with all those guys, but I was in like the jazz improv class with Justin DeChocho, and I was playing guitar. I graduated. I told him where I was going to go to University of North Florida. He said, "Yeah, I know they have a good program." Bunky Green, who recently passed away, he runs the program there. He's a great musician. You should be fine. And off I went. And literally last year, Julius Tolentino was hosting the regional Ellington, essentially Ellington, the regional festival at Newark Academy, and he brought me in to to be a clinician, but he also brought in Justin DeChocho, whom I hadn't seen in 25 years. And you know what? He looked at me and he said, "We're all going around the table, all the band directors and the clinicians are going around the table introducing us." And then when I said my name, he pointed, he goes, "Class of 92, LaGuardia High School." I'm like, "Yes. How did you remember?" I was waiting till we all, to have a moment to say, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but you were highly influential in my decision to study jazz in college." He knew he needed to just see he needed to confirm the name, but he remembered me from 25 years earlier, and then we ended up doing a clinic together, and that was mind-boggling, because I was like, I learned so much from him, and here I am, like, doing a clinic with him on rhythm and swing and blues, and it was a really great moment for me, full circle kind of thing. Yeah.
So what's interesting to me is, well, first of all, there's a lot to your background, and I don't want to necessarily go over things that are already out there. Maybe we can find something new. I do want to reference and credit a fantastic interview that Abel Morales did with you in 2020. It is on his YouTube page, Yardbird Entertainment. So everybody look this up, Yardbird Entertainment on YouTube. Abel Morales interviews Oscar Perez, and both these gentlemen have been instrumental, pun intended, to helping me in what I do here at the library, but also have always been very generous with their time and their knowledge. And so it's a great interview. So for more details that we don't cover today, just check out that interview. I can't reference enough of how fantastic it was. So now you seem to have quite an interest in education. You not only in all the places you've attended, but
Mhm.
also in all the places that you've taught. So let's talk a little bit first about your influences with Danilo Perez.
Oh yeah, yeah. So Danilo, well, it's quite simple. When I was at the University of North Florida, I'm a New Yorker. I was born and raised in New York, and but my parents moved to Florida, so I followed them down to the state of Florida. But I did not go to South Florida. I went to North Florida, and I went to the university there because they had a great jazz program, even though I didn't know anything about jazz when I got there, really. I mean, um, so when we got to our senior year, which would have been 1996, 95, 96, something like this, a lot of us were starting to audition to grad school, starting to move to different areas. So a bunch of friends and I decided we were going to drive to Chicago to go to the IAJE convention, the International Association of Jazz Educators convention, which we had performed at the previous year in Atlanta, and it was very eye-opening because all the schools would go set up booths. At that time, there was a big record label presence at these conventions, and so they would bring in amazing artists to perform. And so in 97, we drove up to Chicago, four or five of us, I don't remember. got in a car from Jacksonville, Florida. We drove to Chicago to go to this convention, and I had not heard of Danilo before then. And I remember I went because I had met Eric Reed, the great pianist, and he was going to be there performing with a trio, and he told me about it. So I was like, I'm going to go check out Eric. But at the same time, I checked out Rini Rosnes for the first time. She was playing with McBride, Steve Nelson, and Tony Reedus. I checked out a very young pianist named Brad Meldau playing trio. I never heard of him, and it was amazing. And I checked out Danilo Perez playing with Avishai Cohen, the bassist, and Jeff Tain Watts. And I just sat in that huge conference room, like, oh my God, this is like I need this in my life. And then I met him, and I found that he was teaching at the New England Conservatory in Boston. And I decided then and there that I was going to go study with him, whatever it took. So that's what led me to Boston. And he really became a mentor to me. You know, I moved there. Um, we started our lessons, even though I never returned for my second year because of scholarship issues. Like I didn't have enough to warrant a second year. I stayed in Boston for another year working and taking lessons from him whenever he would come to town. I would go to his house, we would hang out for hours, and he really gave me a lot. When I then moved to New York to finish at Queens College, whenever Danilo would come to play like at the Jazz Standard or the Blue Note or the Vanguard, I would go see him. He'd always put me on the list, and we either have an impromptu lesson or not. And to this day, you know, we've become really good friends. And he is like a big brother to me. He's fantastic, and his whole approach to education, to understanding the music, to paying it forward, to trying to spread the news of this music and um, of the legacy of the music and the importance of spreading it to like not just musicians but all kinds of people. It's evident in the work he's done in his life, and it's inspiring. And so if I can even do like a fifth of what he's done, I'm in good shape. You know, I think I've given a good amount. And because I met him through the jazz education system, basically, I then became, and I was also inspired by my previous professors, you know, people like Bill Prince and Rich Madison and Bunky Green and Barry Green and Kevin Bales, all of my teachers that I had, and I'm probably leaving a bunch out, in undergrad, I looked up to them because they were great musicians and they were also teaching and they also played around town. I would go check them out. And so I was inspired by them. Never did I think I would run a jazz program. I just wanted to teach. You know what I mean? I thought this is good. My parents would approve. This is a real job. And so I always kind of split my desire to be in the arts, not just in performing, but in education as well, because it gave me so much, you know. So yeah, but Danilo for sure was instrumental, pun intended, in uh in ushering a path forward for me, you know.
One of the things that comes up frequently in these interviews is the fact that each musician has either had the great benefit of having a mentor,
Mhm.
and like the talking about how back in the day, before you had any sort of educational jazz program, you had to rely on mentors. You met on the bandstands, you met in the different clubs. It would take you under their wing, and
Yeah.
then they would help usher you kind of up the ladder. Now we have all these programs, but still that mentorship, like Steve Laspina was talking about how Rufus Reed was a mentor to him,
Mhm.
and you know how when I speak to musicians who are also passionate about educating and being incredible teachers, they take that mentorship very seriously for handing that down to who's coming up. And it sounds like you do the same.
I want to do more. I'm going to be honest with you. Like the idea of mentorship, what I try to create, especially in my duties at Montclair State, is I try to create the avenue for a mentorship to to happen naturally and organically. I will say though, it's great you bring this up because I think this is something that people can you know get something from, especially younger people. I think it's up to the person who is the mentee, not so much the mentor. Like it's great to be in a position to mentor, and if you see somebody that needs, you know, some guidance, sure, give it to them. That's fantastic. But I do think it's up to the person who is looking for the guidance, you know, to be proactive. And I'm going to be honest, I did not have that. I did not have that as much as I should have had that. I did not have that thing like pounding the pavement, so to speak, to look for a gig. I just wanted to practice, and I wanted to hang with my friends, and I wanted to just be in awe of the music. But I, somebody gave me some good advice, which is like, if you take care of the music, it'll take care of you at some point. I was never super proactive about that, but whenever I met a musician that I really liked, I always made my business to let them know how much I cared about them, and about their music and their output. So I did do that, but I never really actively sought somebody to mentor me. But I know that's a thing, and I think I wish I would have done that more. I ended up receiving that from Danilo and from some of my early band leaders like Wycliffe Gordon, who basically realized that I needed help to get from point A to point B, right? So I'm appreciative of that. But I wish I would have been a lot more proactive about that when I was in my 20s, because I do think that can make a huge difference. And honestly, we don't have as many bands anymore where that happens. Like a band like Bernard Harper, these bands, he is amazing at what he is doing with the people he chooses to be in his band, and bringing young people in the jam sessions that he coordinates and he hosts. I think he has that mind because he had that. And I would like to do that more. So thank you for asking me about it, because I realize, there's a time where you learn, there's a time when you earn, and then there's a time when you return, you know, the things that you've received. And I think I'm now getting to that age. I got the little white hairs on my beard letting me know that you know the time is upon me.
But I'm gonna if I have to take a little bit of an umbrage with what you're saying, because you do return. You've taught at Jazz House Kids. You've been teaching students. You're involved with the girls choir. You're involved in Saint Edward of the Martyr Church.
Right, right.
You're giving. You're not just returning. You're giving in in full multifold. So I think you're being a little hard on yourself, and I think you need to take credit for everything that you've given back, because it's amazing how much you've accomplished.
Well,
Um,
I appreciate that. Thank you. I don't do all those things at once, and then some of those things I don't do anymore. But I will say that yes, throughout my years, I've realized that if I want to be part of a community, which I find to be a very important part of anything, honestly, like any kind of school, any kind of gig, any kind of scene, it really, you have to foster and be willing to be part of a community. And that community has given back to me so much, or is given to me so much, that when I can, I try to give back to it in different forms. So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
so let's talk a little bit about all your degrees, your multi, and where you're teaching. You are at Montclair State University, Cali School of Music. You're the coordinator of the Jazz Studies program. You're the director of the MSU Jazz Ensemble, the Jazz Piano faculty member, Jazz Arranging and Performance Practicum are what I guess you focus on teaching.
Yes.
What I find amazing, so within the last, with all that you've done, you decided to go back to school, which I just found incredible. Um, you earned your doctorate in jazz arts advancement from the Manhattan School of Music. The question I want to ask you is, to now take this into a doctorate level, what is it that you didn't already learn or know? Because you've been teaching private piano since 1994. You've
Right.
attended NEC, you've attended University of North Florida, you've attended all these wonderful programs. What is it that you were hoping to learn by getting a doctorate? And then the second part of that question is, what do you hope from learning that to impart?
That is a great question. So it's a question that I was asking myself as I was doing. I was like, why am I doing this? But so to be frank, I never thought beyond a master's degree that I would need to go to school, right? Um, I realized even 20 years ago that the master's degree was becoming a very important degree to have, because most of my friends were doing it, and I realized, like, to teach at the college level, even as an adjunct, they were looking for master's degrees. It was for me to go from an undergrad to a grad degree to the programs that I attended in order to get my master's, was also um, an opportunity for me to get to Boston, to get to New York, to create those networks, to learn more. So for those, it really was about learning as much as I wanted, as I could from the music, and creating a network of people that would be, instrumental, pun intended, to my career as a young musician. Now, when I started teaching, and I have to credit Dave Stryker and Mike Lee, two of my faculty members at Montclair, they basically got me in to Montclair State. I live in West Orange. Montclair is a 20-minute drive. They both were teaching at Montclair. And when a piano chair became available, they recommended me to Dr. Jeff Kunkel, who ran the program. He founded the program, basically. Um, and so when I went into my interview, I went in, I did some sample teaching, and Jeff offered me the job as piano teacher. And that was it, and practicum. So I did those things. I was still very active in playing and everything like that. Few years later, he said, I became like the assistant coordinator because I realized there was a lot of things that I could do to help, you know, grow the program and to help out. And so he helped me to help the program basically. And so then he said, I'm getting ready to retire in the next few years. If you have eyes to maybe take over or to do this, what I'm doing, you probably should get your doctorate. And it was great advice. And so for like years, I looked for an online program, something that I can do when I was on the road or something I can do part time. I found nothing. So I then ended up in Manhattan School of Music. I only applied to one program. I didn't want to move. I had a family, I had kids. I couldn't move to another city to do a doctor. So MSM was really the only place, and I was so glad that they accepted me, and they made it financially viable for me to go. Um, but when I realized that, oh, I'm going to do this degree, I also get to be a student now as a 40-year-old. This is actually kind of amazing. And Jim Saltzman, great saxophonist, great educator who teaches there. I've been friends with him from the early days of playing at Cecil's Jazz Club in the big band. Uh, he gave me some great advice and books to study and things so that I can get in. He also helped me throughout that process. But what I realized is that I'm going to get to learn three things that I already do, but I can do them better. Number one, I was going to learn about pedagogy. So I was going to learn how to be a more effective teacher and clinician. I was going to learn about the music itself as an improviser. And most importantly, I was going to learn more about composition because all the doctor students, they take lessons from Jim McNeely, who, for me, I mean, as a composer, he was always up there. Always. He always has been up there for me in terms of like the craft, the style, the history, just the breadth of his work. I was excited. And so I got to study with Jim for 3 years. The icing on the cake was the fact that I was going to study with Jim McNeely, and I was going to study composition with one of my heroes from the time I was in college. And I heard, his work with the Vanguard Orchestra, his own records. I was always a big fan of his writing and of his playing. And so I got to study with Jim for 3 years, and it really was one of the most helpful things. I was able to compose for big band, of course, but I also was able to compose string quartets, brass quintets, percussion ensemble, all the way up to studio orchestra, which is basically a big band with an entire 80-piece orchestra behind it. And that was basically my dissertation was that. And so now my work at Montclair is very much informed. My scholarship as a professor there is very much informed by writing for a group that size and really understanding um, how to bring opportunities for people that wouldn't be able to play in those ensembles. MSM is a very special place in that they have that. They have a studio orchestra program where the composers write for that, and they choose people to um, to do reading sessions and concerts. And not every school has a studio orchestra, with 100 people on stage playing, jazz with strings and woodwinds and brass and, like in that kind of thing. It's kind of like the Metropole Orchestra, Vince Mendoza, like all those kind of like instrumentations. That doesn't exist at every school. And it is my dream to bring that kind of a opportunity to Montclair because I know it's possible. We have an amazing orchestra, we have a great big band, we have a great wind symphony. It's a matter of having the somebody in place to kind of make that happen. And so that I didn't realize that was going to inform my scholarship as a professor at Montclair, but that's absolutely what those years with Jim and writing for those instrumentations, that's what that kind of pointed the path forward for me as a, as an educator, so it was great. It was really great. It couldn't have worked out more perfect in terms of the timing, the proximity, and the program itself. I have to thank Stefan Harris at Ingrid Jensen for kind of like shepherding my time there and really uh, offering me the opportunities to prep conduct the Miguel Zenon big band and other opportunities to teach. I was basically an adjunct at MSM the whole time I was there, teaching ear training, teaching class piano while I was, while I was studying there. So it really was a fantastic 4 years of my life.
I just, you have Educator. It's funny when I look at the different hats that all the musicians wear. Some
Mhm.
are bigger hats than others, right? But you equally are a pianist. You're equally composer. You're equally educator. In fact, I'm almost wondering if educator is the biggest hat that you have.
Depends on the day, honestly. Like
Yeah.
some days I'm all about education. My schedule dictates the fact that I am doing these things. And then other times I am in my office trying to finish a big band chart. We had Bella Fleck with us last semester and I wrote something. I arranged one of his tunes for our big band to play with him. So there I was, yeah, I was in my education thing because I was doing it for Montclair, but I was totally composing. And then when I'm on the road with Lakeisha Benjamin, I am performing, and we're playing festivals, playing clubs, playing, all kinds of theaters and things like that. So depending on the day that you ask me, yeah, that's what I'm doing. But I do think that I've always admired people who have that kind of triple threat kind of thing. And Jim McNeely is one of them. Great educator, great pianist, great composer. So for me, that's the equivalent of like in baseball, the 5 tool player, somebody who can do all the things. And it's a lot of spinning plates, but I try to keep all those things happening, and it's not always easy, but it's definitely rewarding.
So when you were learning, as you were talking about with the composition,
Mhm.
how and writing for these larger size orchestras, etc. Did it impact how you chose to compose your own music for an ensemble, a combo, a duo?
Yes, yes. I mean, to me, there are basically two directions that I tend to go in when I'm writing, and that is one is I'm just writing good music, trying to write good music, right? Trying to write good melodies, good chord structures, anything that can be boiled down to a lead sheet that I can put in front of a piano trio or a quintet and do that. Um, all the way up to a studio orchestra or all the way up to a big band, so like, okay, I have the source material and it is solid, and from here this will be the basis for the work. That's one direction. That's always been the direction I've taken. But Jim introduced me to another direction I find incredibly helpful, which is writing with that instrumentation in mind. It doesn't mean that you stop writing good melodies, but you're writing with that size group, and uh, with that size group in mind. What am I going to write for a big band? What am I going to have the saxes doing? What am I going to have the brass doing? What is the rhythm section going to do here? And let me write from that point of view. And so for me, if I get the opportunity to write for a group like that size or any group that's just not a trio, I'm already thinking in terms of the orchestration and the arranging, never really thought about that before. For me, it had always been a two-step process. Write the music and then arrange it. But Jim turned me on to the idea of writing with the instrumentation in mind. So I thank him for that because, when you are commissioned to write something for a big band, as much as you would like to say, here, I'm just going to arrange something I've already written, chances are you're already writing on a deadline. So you don't have time for that first step. You're doing it all at once, so.
I have asked several composers and musicians when they're composing, how do you get to your melody? Do you think of a specific, and you partly answered this. Are you thinking of, I want to write a samba. I want to, or a bossa. I want to write a waltz. I want to write straight up jazz. I want to go more Latin flavored, Afro-Cuban. Or are you? And where do you get your inspirations from? Is it from a family member? Is it Rini Rosse's? When I interviewed her, got inspiration from a bird in her backyard during the pandemic. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I find that fascinating. That how do you approach compositions in that regard?
It's funny. Sometimes I would get asked this question about what comes first, the melody, the chords, the rhythm, the style. And I used to say, oh, melody, always melody. I think about melodies because at the time, that was my entry point. But in recent years, and from the help of talking to other composers, talking to students, a good idea comes from anywhere in any form. So you might be messing with a rhythm that is new to you, or a time signature that is new to you, or a style of music that is new to you, and that inspires something. Or it can be something, for me, a lot of times the things that I practice become songs. Like I'm practicing something, I find that it makes a very good idea harmonically or rhythmically or melodically, it becomes a tune. And sometimes it's just inspiration. Like, oh, you know what? I've never written a tune that sounds like this tune by this person, and I love that tune. I'm going to write my version of it. As much as they may try to write my version of that, it's always going to go left. And then it becomes my thing. But the the impetus for it might start out as inspiration from something that I admire that I is in my record collection already. And honestly, like sometimes if I have what would be described as writer's block, I just put on some music that I love, and next thing you know, it's gone. I'm back in it. So and of course, the greatest form of inspiration is a deadline. So if you know you have to write something, I have notebooks of stuff that I can refer back to and go, oh, okay, that's right. This was something that was undeveloped. Let me work on this for a while. It's always easier to edit something than to come up with something brand new. But so to answer your question, I'm not trying to be vague, but the reality is that nowadays I've realized that a tune can start with a groove. A tune can start with just even an idea of like, where do I picture myself playing this tune? Okay, I picture myself playing this tune at brush culture. What is that ambiance like? Let me write for that. You know what I mean? Or a specific musician in mind. You know, if I'm writing something and I'm thinking about like my brother on bass, Anthony, I'm like, oh, I know he likes to play this kind of shapes. I'm gonna write something with that shape because I know he's gonna enjoy it. Whatever the case is. Um, and so I try to like be open to all of that, because they all will inform the starting point. And once you start, then you just take it through the paces and figure out what's missing and what needs to be there. And I always tell my composition and arranging students, if you just ask yourself, what if, and just think of something, you have many different paths that you can follow. What if the melody were played by the bass? What if I paired a flute with an oboe here? Or what if I did guitar and trombone on this? What if the Barry played the melody? Or what if the Barry and the drums just had a duo thing for a part of this arrangement? Whatever. Just think of not even the craziest, but just think of things that come to mind. And then the what if question really helps to spur on the possibilities, you know.
That's a great answer. Thank you for that.
All right.
One of the things you talked about in your interview with Abel is in teaching students, um, well, many different things that you try to impart is to have a focus. And you spoke about reading rhythms correctly. And then you also were talking about learning bebop, especially for jazz,
Yeah.
learning the bebop heads. And if, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's recognizing the chord progressions, the harmonic progressions, melodic patterns, or the rhythmic skeleton of the tune, right? Is that what you're trying to impart as for when you're talking about learning the bebop heads?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I always make a disclaimer about, especially with students, is I can't show you everything you need to know. I can only tell you what I've done. And you have to decide for yourself if that's the route you want to go or not. It's up to you. Because I had many teachers, some successful, some not, in telling me you should do this, or you want to do this, or you need to do this. And while I understand that that's important, I also got it just as much from the teachers that said to me, here's what I did. This is what worked for me. You need to do your version of this, right? And so I find that that helps students a little bit more because it doesn't it doesn't give them any kind of ultimatums. Because ultimately, like this music is it's a choice. You know what I mean? We don't have to do any of this, right? So if they take ownership over how they do it, then I find that it's more effective because then they ask the questions that need to be asked, like, well, how do I think about it this way? Or how can I think about it if I do it that way? And then we can get into the business of it. But to mandate that they learn bebop or the mandate that they learn their chord progressions, obviously they should do all those things. I'm still doing all those things. Um, but if you can just be humble and say, I don't know the answers to everything. And believe me, the longer I teach, the more I know I don't know, right? I'll say to them, I'm not sure about this, but I can tell you that I did that. And hopefully that will help you. I find that that is a little bit more of it's a better approach for me. Um, so yeah, and I do think that the things you mentioned before, in terms of playing bebop, knowing your harmony, knowing your theory, knowing how to read rhythms, knowing how to read it all, um, and having the inspiration of the music and understanding the history of the music and what your place in it is and what the music has to offer you on many different levels, it's all integral to your becoming a better musician and to ultimately become what a friend of mine, Brian Woodruff, coined as giggable. It makes you giggable. Otherwise, what are we doing? Because if you don't have eyes to like leave school or graduate from school rather and work, then what are we doing? My whole thing when I was in college is like, I want to be able to support myself playing this music. I can think of no better way to make money than to play music. Are you kidding me? Like, you're gonna give me money so that I can play music like that. It's a win-win situation. So I don't know. So So for me, it was always about being giggable. When can I be giggable? You know what I mean? So yeah.
You talked too about how back in your day and my day, the importance of learning tunes, and that it's not as emphasized as much now. However, to your point, by learning tunes makes you giggable.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that nowadays students learn less tunes because they don't really need to know them on some gigs. But I will say that learning tunes puts you in the conversation with people who require that you know tunes. So by not learning tunes, you're already cutting out a huge part of your income. Boom, that's it. Which I don't think is very smart at any level. Um, More important than learning tunes, although learning tunes is incredibly important. Pat Metheny was at Montclair, and he emphasized learning tunes. And I don't remember the last time I heard. I mean, yes, of course he plays standards, but it's been a while since he put out a record of standards. But he can throw it on any standard. And he was talking about his practice regimen. It was incredible, playing giant steps in 12 keys, playing falling grace in 12 keys, inspiring for me. Um, but basically, what he was saying is, and what I agree with is, learning tunes allows you to learn music, allows you to get good at learning things, anything. Memorizing tunes allows you to memorize originals in a system that will help you to get that original down a lot faster and understanding the way the whole thing is put together. So those are like as important as learning tunes, developing your ears. Because if you learn a bunch of songs, you may not know every song on the bandstand, but if you've learned a bunch of other songs that sound like it, you can start to hear the chord progressions. Oh, okay, it does that thing right. It's the same bridge as this one tune. I hear that. Oh, I hear the four chord followed by the sharp four diminished going to oh, I hear that. You wouldn't have learned any of those things if you had not just taken the time to learn a bunch of songs when you had the time. So although nowadays students are more they're happier with just playing funk grooves in one key, I get that, but there's still people that like to play actual songs, and so you should probably learn that if you want to work. You know what I mean? um,
Is it about building that foundation?
Absolutely. The thing is, there's nothing bad that can happen from learning a bunch of songs. Only good things can happen. So why not do it? You know,
Do you
that's
still encourage students to explore classical music and other forms of music to enhance their jazz?
Well, it's funny you should say that because although I do think that a good foundation for any musician is studying all music, especially classical music, I don't think that, let's just put it this way. I don't think that if you're studying a bunch of Bach, that it's going to make you necessarily a better bebop player, but it can, right? But it's going to make you a better musician to understand how that music works, right? I do feel blessed that at the Cali School of Music, we have, like I mentioned before, a great orchestra, a great wind symphony, great choirs, where if you are learning music, you're gonna be able to be in those environments, and you can see how those environments can help the environment you're in. Um, so I do recommend it. My piano students, part of the piano curriculum is that they take classical lessons as well. You know what I mean? And I know a lot of schools do that with their pianists, because there is a foundational thing that happens when you study, Bach and Brahms and Beethoven, the three Bs, and Debussy and Ravel. Um, there is something that happens to your piano playing that it matures quicker and you understand all the sounds that you're looking for, or are all in the musics that came before jazz as well. And to me, Scott Joplin, Jelly Roll Morton, that's not classical music, but that is the bridge from classical to jazz. And if you're not studying those things the way you study, because you study Scott Joplin like you would study Chopin, it's all right now. Just play this, and you're going to have, 1 foot in classical and 1 foot in jazz. It's right there. It's the bridge. And when I went to grad school and I studied with Sir Roland Hanna, that's what we played. We played Scott Joplin and Jelly Roll Morton, Art Tatum, and Chopin and Debussy. We played all that stuff, and I saw the connection between them all. So I always encourage it.
When I think back on the bands that I've just seen you perform in just as this short amount of time, Big Funk has a very distinct, almost a funk slash jazz slash like almost progressive rock sound to it.
Yeah, yeah, big time. Big fusion sounds.
Right. And so that's like one of the entries of my hearing you as a pianist is like, oh wow, okay. That's his style. Like there's a limitation of me as a listener. So then I go hear you with the Abel Morales and you're doing this wonderful Latin and I'm like, oh wow, okay. That's his style. And then of
Right.
course now you're performing at the Ramsey Library with this quartet and its standards and one and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I guess the reason I'm bringing this up is how do you impart to your students to have that broad ability to perform these, whether it's fusion or whether it's Latin or whatever the influences are? How do you get them to want to pursue that?
Well, they have to want to pursue it. I mean, and I think that the more you know, the more you work. And so it's not just about enjoying it, but being practical in today's economy, in this gig economy, where if somebody calls you to do a gig like Big Funk and you don't understand how to play funk, or you don't, or in the case of the pianist, you don't understand how synthesizers work or how an organ's supposed to sound, um, then you're just not going to get called for that gig. And the same thing if you're playing with an Afro Latin band, if you don't know your montunos and you don't understand the way uh, the puzzle of Latin music gets put together, even if you're not great at it, if you just understand how to do that, that you're not going to work. And both of those things really helped me in my present gig with Lakeisha Benjamin, because her music is, we do a bunch of Coltrane, but then we also do a bunch of like funk, and we do straight ahead. I mean, it runs the gamut, and I'm really grateful that I spent time in all these different kinds of groups and coming up and learning that. She also does like we do a hymn. Usually we do like Amazing Grace, or we do I Don't Feel No Always Tired. I got that from being in church, like learning in church and learning from Wycliffe Gordon, like this is how you play gospel music on piano. Like if I hadn't done those things, I wouldn't be prepared for that version of it when I play with Lakeisha. And so I think it's really about opening yourself up for the practical, and being available to do these things. Now, beyond that, beyond the practical, I do think that all these musics are related, and they're all related through jazz. All these things are not necessarily offshoots of jazz, but they are offshoots of a jazz education. Learning jazz, learning bebop, learning tunes puts you in the middle of how it puts you in the middle of problem solver, right? What are the properties of this style that I need to master in the same way that I mastered or tried to master the properties of playing jazz well and authentically? Because there is something that makes funk funk. There's something that makes gospel gospel, something that makes Afro-Cuban Afro-Cuban. There's something that makes fusion fusion. And so figuring out what the code is part of the fun. And the reality is that jazz, there's gospel flavored jazz, there's Latin flavored jazz, there's fusion flavored jazz, there's, all these things. Jazz is like the common denominator for me. And as somebody that was in the education system, it wasn't just about learning bebop. It was about learning all these things because I was getting called to do all these things. So I basically put all that stuff in the blender, not just to be able to play those gigs, but when I compose, I don't want to limit myself to just like, oh, I'm a straight ahead pianist, so I can only write rhythm change. Like, no, that doesn't interest me at all. And so going back to the first part of your question, I think it's incumbent on the student to say, well, I actually want to do this because some students don't. They're like, I don't like gospel music. Fine, you don't have to. Don't do that. But don't get upset if you get called for a gig and you go there and you don't know and then you get fired. Like, that that's a choice. So, yeah, that's it. Or you don't get called for those gigs at all, or any gig that's part of it. Like Lakeisha's gig, I am always amazed at how much her music like encapsulates all these different styles and genres that all go to serve a greater purpose, which is her voice and her gig and her records. Great. I'm so happy that I'm able to do some of these things well. And whatever I'm not doing well, I practice. I practice those things so that I, can support her in the way that she needs to be supported, so that I may keep working. It's like, to me, it's actually very simple, learn the things you don't know, learn the things you don't do, practice things you don't do well, So, I mean, I know that was a long-winded answer, but I hope that answered your question.
It did. And one of the things you also had talked about with Abel is where you're, or in an interview I found too, is just to be a musician, you have to kind of have the focus and like eat, breathe, drink music,
Yeah.
think music, right?
As long as you can. Yeah. I mean, if you have the opportunity, that's why I always find it funny when I have students who are not fully in it. It's like you need to be fully in it now because later on, as time and your circumstances change, you won't have this kind of time. And so if you don't do it now, I fear that you may never have the opportunity to do it. And hindsight being 2020, it's really going to be a shame when you're 35 and you realize, oh, I didn't do the things 10 years ago I should have done because now I can't, you know? And so I'm always trying to say, listen, your time here is limited and your time out there is even more limited if you're not already doing it by the time you get out there. So please, for your sake and mine, or really for just your sake, practice now and immerse yourself in this world as much as you possibly can. Um, because no matter how much you immerse yourself in this world, it's not going to be enough. So get yourself in a situation where you can continue to do this, but only if you want to. If you don't think you want to, don't do it. You know what I
Do
mean?
you do you encourage your students to try to see as much live music as possible?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there is, not only seeing it, but playing it. You know what I mean? So jam sessions, we have two jam sessions that happen on campus every week that we set up for the students to play with each other in a controlled environment. Mike Lee runs a jam session at Brush Culture every Monday. We encourage them to go to that. We encourage them to go to Smalls and all these things. And then we not only bring in artists that they can interact with, but then we're always telling them about things that are happening. Luckily for us, Montclair is in a prime location where the kids are in the city in no time. We have two train stations on our campus that go right to Midtown. So the ones that want it, they absolutely take part in it because it's there for them to take part in. And I think the ones that do take part in it realize like, wow, I am lucky to be at this school and have these clubs and these artists around me. Because if I were in any other city, I may not have it the same way. I would have that version of it, but it wouldn't be going to hear the Vanguard band any Monday I want. You know what I mean? Like, come on, that's like it blows my mind, you know? Um, so yeah, we definitely encourage that as a community of educators. You know, I got to say that I absolutely love the faculty we have in Montclair. You know, I mean, I hired more than half at this point, and I hired everybody that I know cares about the legacy of this music and imparting what they know to the next generation and the next generation after that, because that's how they came up. And so it's a faculty full of people who care, that create a village and understand the importance of what they do, you know, and the selflessness it takes to do it. I love them all, each and every one of them, because they're doing the work. I just kind of steer the ship and make sure that everything is looking good on a spreadsheet, but they're the ones doing the work as educators. You know, it takes, like I said before, it really does take a village. So people say to me all the time, you're doing a great job in Montclair, you're building a great program. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Not, but it's not just me. You have to understand that if it were just me, it would never get off the ground. But we're celebrating a program now that is triple in size of what it was 5 years ago, based solely on hiring the right people, giving them the right tools and the right environment, and and letting them do their thing, which they do incredibly well.
Before we wrap this up, I just want to talk about some of your CDs. At the end of this interview will be the information of your website as well as how to follow you on social media. So we have three of your wonderful CDs in our library collection that you can check out anytime. The first is Nuevo Comienzo.
Yeah, there it is. That's a young version of me.
You look the same. The second one we have is the Ing, and I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about each one of these.
Sure.
And then the last is my favorite, Prepare a Place for Me.
Oh, cool.
So would you like to just give a few sentences on each of these?
I will, but before I do that, I would like to say that my favorite record is one that you didn't hold up, and because the name of the artist is different. So on those, my name Oscar Perez is the artist, but my second record is called Oscar Perez Nuevo Comienzo, is the name of the band, and the name of the record is Afro Pian Affair, and that was a record that came out in 2011 with the help of a Chamber Music America grant. Uh, that I received to write music, and it became the you know the focus of that record. I'll get you a copy of that. It's online, but the artist name is not Oscar Perez, but Oscar Perez Nuevo Comienzo. It's before I realized that how you search for things was actually really important. Um, and so it's the only record under that artist's name, but it is my record, and it's mostly the same band as the very first record you held up, which was entitled Nuevo Comienzo as the record name. The only difference is Jerome Jennings joins us on that record that I mentioned that you didn't hold up. So there's actually four records out there that I'm responsible for, and a fifth one in the works. So a little bit about each record, sure. So the very first record, what happened was I received an opportunity to go to Russia and to bring a band with me, but I had no band and I had no music. So so the opportunity came up, and I took the opportunity, uh, and I put a band together with Greg Glassman, Stacy Dillard, my brother Anthony, and Jeff Clapp on drums. And we did that tour. We were in Russia for about a month, and we traveled all over. I wrote a bunch of music that we worked out on the gig on that tour, and then we came back and we recorded that very first record. We did that entire record in one day with special guests Peter Bernstein and Wycliffe Gordon, who were two people that I was playing with at the time, and and Angel Desai, who's a great vocalist, and everybody did an amazing job. And we had been working on that music for weeks on tour, and then we just went in and recorded it. Um, I really enjoyed that record. I still play some of the songs off that record. The next record that you mentioned was the Ing. In other words, you know, we put the Ing in swing. And so the OKB trio, one of my favorite trios, Kuriko Sugawa on bass and Brian Woodruff on drums. This was a trio that came out of playing a bunch of gigs in Brooklyn and Queens, and playing at the Katana when the Katana was still a thing, and the jam sessions. I met them. We all formed a really close bond musically and personally. They're friends of mine. Kuriko and her husband Daisuke Abe, they moved back to Japan right before the pandemic. And when I was in Japan a few months ago with Lakeisha, I we met up in Tokyo. They live right outside of Tokyo. I went to their gig. They came to my gig. We hung out. It was fantastic. And Brian and I continue to play together. But that trio, as a trio, kind of disbanded because of proximity, you know. Um, but I love that record. It was a really great experience. We recorded it at, I think it's called Big Orange Sheep Record Studios in Brooklyn, and great, just a great snapshot of a trio that enjoyed working together. And the last
I'm
record,
going to just interject on that on the
Sure.
OKB. One of your songs, your compositions, El Padrino. I love that song. I
Oh,
absolutely love that
yeah,
song.
it's funny you should mention that because it's a different version of it from the first record. So El Padrino is like my only hit. Well, not only, but it's my hit. So they still play it on BGO. Sheila Anderson plays it all the time. She just loves that song. I still play it probably every gig because people like it. And I like it too. It's a good tune. But we re-recorded that for that record because we were playing the tune a lot, but we wanted to play it faster. We wanted to put our own spin on it. So there's a second recording of that. So if you notice, it's a trio version versus the quintet version that I had done, uh, for the first record. Thank you. Yeah, I really like that song. I really should write a big band arrangement of that because why not? Um, the last record Prepare placed for me is, my latest record, which is actually quite a few years ago now, was a trio that I was playing with a good amount around that time with Thompson Nealand and Alvester Garnett. And I was also playing with Bruce Williams, great alto player. So I invited him to play on half the record, and then the other half would be trio. And it was basically my return because that record actually came out before the OKB trio record came out. Um, and it was my return to playing trio because I had been doing a lot of things with bigger groups. Nuevo Comienzo was a sextet. Um, I had been doing a lot of big band writing, and so I decided I needed to put out a record of just trio stuff and arrangements um, for trio and quartet. So that's a great record, and that also kind of like gave me other tunes that I still play to this day on my trio gigs. So I like all those records, but the new one that I'm going to be putting out soon is going to be a big band record, something with mixed instrumentations, because I've written so much music in the last 3 or 4 years and so much original music as well that it seems silly that at this point in my career I haven't done a big band record under my own name, right? So that's kind of like a dream of mine to put one out.
I like this idea of doing El Padrino as a big band.
Yeah.
I think you've just given yourself that idea, and I'm going to endorse it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I definitely need the encouragement, I just have to find the time to do it. I'm working on cloning myself so I can give them all. I'm gonna clone myself twice, the educator, the composer, and the pianist. That would be ideal.
Squared.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
What I love about Prepare a Place for Me, your version of the nearness of you, it really touches me. Like it brings me to tears anytime I hear it, and it also
Oh,
calms me down.
thank you.
Like I find great comfort in your presentation of that song, but it's so beautiful, and I can't put into words what I want to. I just have to just tell everybody go hear it and or check this out from the library and listen to it or find it on Spotify. It is such a perfect arrangement. It
Thank you.
really
That
is.
arrangement was inspired by two of my favorite pianists that I never got to study. I don't really think I actually properly even met. But they were pretty big influences on that arrangement. That one was Fred Hirsch, which is the whole intro is like for me is like a Fred Hirsch kind of like tribute to him, and then the tune itself, Hank Jones. I just love the way Hank Jones plays ballads. His voicings, his voice leading, just the quiet command that Hank Jones has. I wanted to try to bring that out in my playing, and so I actually really worked on that arrangement with those two pianists in mind in terms of the way they approach melody and the way they approach harmony. Yeah, so I really like that arrangement too. It's not an easy arrangement, and so I've only played it a few times live. Um, but it's because it's not one you just kind of like say, "Hey, let's do this." You have to kind of rehearse it. So it's not super involved, but it's involved enough.
The other song that I very much favor on this record is Snake Charm, which is another one of your compositions.
Yeah.
And just as a funny aside, I think I shared with you, I record on my phone the concerts when I see anybody. And
Yeah.
then when I'm at work, I listen to them. And I've been listening to your recording from the Ramsey Public Library and then ours over and over and over and over again, like once a week. Excuse me, once a day. You know, I listen to them a lot, but it's as I'm working, it's what kind of gets into
Sure.
my whole being. So at one point, I was like, "Oh, Snake Charm. Who wrote Snake Charm? That's a very famous song. That's one of the old standards." And I'm looking, and I was like, "Wait a minute, Oscar wrote that.
Yeah.
Wow!" You would become so much part of my like my own jazz knowledge base.
Right.
I was just like, "Oh, yeah." So now you're one of the greats. I just want to let you know, in my brain, you've written one of the great songs. And Snake Charm is a wonderful song.
Thank you so much. I really enjoy that one. And that one has become a big band chart. That one has become, it's funny, when I did my doctoral recital, which was all big band music, because that's, I wanted to hire a big band to do that recital. And I did it at Montclair in my own community. I was looking at the music and I was like, "Ah, I need something kind of peppy, but I have literally like 3 days to write this arrangement." And so I said, okay, I'm going to do Snake Charm. And I tried to do the easiest arrangement I could do given the time, and it ended up being so effective. And I learned another valuable lesson, which is sometimes you just write the thing that you think is too obvious, it actually works out really well. So I can't wait to record my big band version of Snake Charm. Um, I've played it at Montclair, I've played it at MSM. It just works. It's just like one of those arrangements that works, and I like that tune. I would say that's probably the hit off of that record.
One last song that you performed when you were here at the library. It's beautiful, and again, it's something that I'll put on when I just need to kind of have a quiet space or just calm down a little bit or just relax. Is it's a Cuban lullaby named Drume Negrita.
Oh, Drupe Negrita. Yeah, that's yeah. I think this folk song. I don't remember if there's an exact composer on that. I'm embarrassed to say that I don't remember, but I think it's one of those nobody knows who wrote it kind of things. Please don't quote me on that. I apologize if I got that incorrect. It's a melody I've known since I was a kid because it really is a lullaby, you know? Um, I have so many different versions of it, vocal versions, instrumental versions, and yeah, so I wrote a really super easy arrangement on it, and I really enjoy playing it. I play it pretty much every trio gig because it's like my ballad. You know what I mean? Like it's usually a ballad in the set is that tune and that arrangement. Thank you.
It gives me the same consolation I have when I listen to Bill Evans' Peace Piece.
Yes, yes. Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's very much the vibe. I wanted a meditative vibe. You know what I mean? Because it's a lullaby. It's meant to lull you into a different state. And so and at the same time, just a beautiful moment between parent and child. So I think that for me, it was an opportunity to have something on in my set that just really puts people in a different place and it kind of calms everybody down. It's practical as well as beautiful. So thank you. Yeah, I can't wait to I have never recorded that. I want to record that one next.
Now, could you do it that as a big band arrangement?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I know what my next two big band arrangements are going to be.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to talk with me today. I could continue to go on with you forever because I find you absolutely fascinating with so much knowledge. I'm going to include also at the end of this interview the information about how to view the recording from 2023 when Oscar performed here with the quartet. That is always also on our YouTube page. And then coming up March 23rd, Oscar will be performing with Don Braden Ensemble. That recording will also be on our YouTube page to enjoy and share. And please spread the music, share the joy. Follow Oscar on his social media and go hear him play live because become the groupie that I am, and you will not you will not be unhappy that you did. So thank you again for taking the time, Oscar.
Of course. Thank you, Pat. I really appreciate it.